Late today, Egypt said two of its security officers were killed along the border as Israeli forces chased the gunman. Before that development, I spoke with Kalev Ben David, Israel bureau chief of Bloomberg News in Jerusalem. Kalev, has it been some time since there's been an attack on Israeli soil against civilians with this kind of loss of life?
Absolutely. I mean, this is with this kind of loss of life, it's been 3 years, a little more than 3 years since there was an attack at a religious school here in Jerusalem. So this is the most severe attack in that time. And really, even then, it was a lone terrorist. We haven't had this kind. I can't recall the last time we've had this scope of a terrorist attack.
Eilat is in Israel's far south, very close to the Egyptian frontier and the Jordanian frontier. Has it been vulnerable to attacks of this kind before?
Yes, there have been in recent years primarily rocket attacks. A year ago, there were rocket attacks fired from Egypt, from the Sinai, that hit both Eilat and also fell into Jordan. I mean, Israel has a real security problem now with Sinai. The Israeli military feels that the Egyptian security forces have basically lost control of areas of Sinai and have really made it a territory from which terrorists can launch attacks into the south of Israel.
Well, the defense minister, Ehud Barak, said the Egyptian grip over Sinai is weakening as a direct result of the current events in Egypt. Has that brought a different kind of response from Israel itself? Has it had to watch its own western border more carefully?
Yes, this is the southern border, and it's definitely had to increase its vigilance on this border. It's also, on occasion, had to give Egypt permission to bring in some more security forces to deal, for example, with at least 4 attacks on a gas pipeline in Sinai that brings natural gas into Israel from Egypt. Under the Camp David Accords, the Egyptians are limited to the number of troops and security forces they can bring into Egypt, so Israel's had to give it special permission in times. It does not yet want to give them permission to more permanently increase their forces there.
Hamas went out of its way to deny that it had anything to do with this attack, but Israel insisted Hamas was involved and retaliated immediately. Do we know why and how they were so sure?
No, what Israel's retaliation was against a group called the Palestinian Resistance Committees, which is a militant group in Gaza that is not under direct control of Hamas. But the Israeli policy is that Hamas is responsible for all terrorist attacks emanating from the territory. Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip. It's shown that when it wants to crack down on these groups, when they threaten Hamas's own control, Hamas does take action. So it's more a case of Israel holding them responsible rather than seeing Hamas being directly involved in this attack.
So Israel is saying, in effect, you could stop this if you wanted to, Hamas.
Yes, that's the stance they're taking, and they have said repeatedly and warned Hamas that even if Hamas is not directly involved in the attacks, the retaliation could come against Hamas or Hamas-linked groups. This evening, in fact, that wasn't the case. It was this group, 6 members of this group, the Palestinian Resistance Committee, or at least 5 groups, and Palestinians are claiming 1 child, were killed in the attack.
As we discussed earlier, there is instability in Egypt. There's also, on Israel's northern border, instability in Syria. Has there been a rising feeling of threat in Israel because of all the tumult on its borders?
Yes, there has, and a lot of that is linked to next month's possible declaration of Palestinian statehood by the Palestinians at the United Nations. The Palestinian Authority, which is based in the West Bank today and headed by President Mahmoud Abbas, says it's going to go to the United Nations and declare a Palestinian state. Israel's warning that could jeopardize the peace process. There's concern in Israel that could lead to widespread demonstrations, both in the West Bank, also at Gaza, and also at some of the borders. For example, what we saw in Syria a couple of months ago, when Palestinian refugees living in Syria and Lebanon stormed the border. So there was a lot of concern heading to September.
Kalev Ben David from Bloomberg News joined us from Jerusalem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.